In the first half of the 19th century, a new city, Toledo, Ohio, was created at the far edge of the Western Reserve, where the Great Black Swamp once covered the land. The small city grew rapidly. Its strategic location at the corner of Lake Erie made it a natural center of warehousing, banking, business, and shipping. Draining the swamp produced rich farmlands. Business in Toledo was dominated early on by the glass industry, which was soon followed by the manufacture of a whole range of parts needed to supply the new automobile industry up the road in Detroit. The bustling economy encouraged an elegant local society, men and women who were well-traveled, well-read, and ambitious. They built impressive homes, churches, schools, and theaters. These city fathers and mothers built with a vision. They knew, no matter how loudly business was booming, no matter how opulent their surroundings, they knew that a true city must include those institutions that elevate and enlighten the mind. It was a matter of pride as much as it was a devotion to the arts. The Toledo Museum of Art was the first major temple of enlightenment to be built in Toledo. The museum was, and remains, an extraordinary cultural achievement. Its founder, Edward Drummond Libby, had made his fortune revolutionizing the design and manufacture of glassware. Childless, he left the museum an endowment that has allowed it to amass a world-famous collection and carry out community educational programs of the highest caliber. The desire for a Toledo Symphony Orchestra had begun as far back as 1850. The first performance by a Toledo Symphony was in 1897. An embryonic Toledo orchestra played at the museum groundbreaking in 1912. By 1920, an orchestra with a board of trustees had been assembled and launched a concert season. Each program booklet began with a letter from a musical luminary urging Toledo to establish its own symphony. Their language is high-flown, their message clear. You can't be a real city if you don't have a real orchestra.
Dear Sir, I heartily sympathize with the wish and purpose of the Toledo Orchestral Club to establish a symphony orchestra on a permanent basis. Any city that has advanced far enough in its musical progress to desire and to support a symphony orchestra must have also reached the point at which such an orchestra is an indispensable factor in its further musical progress and education. Every city in America, as in Europe, must sooner or later have such an orchestra. Now is the best time. Wishing you a speedy accomplishment of your purpose, I am yours sincerely, Victor Herbert.
In 1933, in the midst of the Great Depression, Florence Scott Libby built the Peristyle, a performing arts and concert hall that echoes and balances the graceful neo-Grecian facade of her husband's art museum. Few concert halls are built in conjunction with an art museum. Perhaps a resident Toledo Symphony might now take its place as one of the pillars of Toledo's cultural life. But although there was a beautiful hall, musicians and music lovers aplenty, there was no single financial patron and no endowment for an orchestra. Efforts to establish a permanent symphony came in fits. Starts, stops, then starts again. But the efforts did continue, driven by fierce passion, a passion often masquerading as gentlewomen at tea parties, and by the unyielding conviction that a civilized city must have its own orchestra. Finally, in 1943, our Toledo Symphony Orchestra made its debut under the baton of Edgar Schenkman. It was small, it was lean, but it was not frail. It had good bones and healthy lungs, and it was ready to grow. It has never stopped growing. But really, what is the point of a resident orchestra? Why bother assembling one at all? Other than that exalted civic pride of an earlier day, is there a reason for the years of work, the struggle, one financial crisis after another, finding musicians, hiring conductors, recruiting armies of volunteers to carry out endless fundraising events? Why do intelligent civic leaders commit themselves to so much work? Because human beings need music. Music reaches down into our very heart and soul and pulls out feelings we didn't know we had. Music can echo our sorrow and give voice to our joy. Music can console us. Music can cheer us up. Music can inspire us. We march to music, we worship with music, we marry amidst music. It is impossible to imagine a world without music. The great symphonic music that we know today has grown from two major sources, two separate roots that twined together over the centuries into a mighty tree. The first is the music created for worship in the earliest days of the Church. Gregorian chant, plain song, polyphony, few people in the Middle Ages could read or write. Common man was considered only a clump of dirt, almost the lowest of the low. The chanting, the carvings, the stained glass, and the transcendent architectural forms of the Gothic cathedrals all served to lift feeble human souls up toward God. But after all, there is a life outside of the church. Over time, otherworldly religious music became blended with secular music, the tender love ballads of the troubadours, the storytelling that blossomed in the 1300s, now written in the vernacular instead of Latin. The Middle Ages edged towards the Renaissance. In Italy, the two traditions, church music and the music of the people, married to become opera. In Northern Europe, in Germany, the great Johann Sebastian Bach spent his entire life composing for his church. He faced a daunting demand. He was expected to write new service music each week. He wrote and played for 40 years, creating a whole new sound, harmonies, counterpoint, choral intricacies, and richness that had not been heard before and has not been equaled since. In Austria, Franz Joseph Haydn faced similar demands. As court musician to a noble family, he was expected to produce a new musical amusement every week for years. He developed and refined and laid down the rules for symphonic form, a major theme that is introduced, developed in a variety of tempos, orchestrations, and secondary melodies, then brought to a resounding finale. His musicianship and his generous, genial character earned him the nickname Papa Haydn. He had a profound effect on the composers who followed, most notably Mozart and Beethoven. The incomparable Mozart took all of these elements, the structure, the elegant ballads, the rich inventive orchestration, and wove them into works of breathtaking invention, surprise, humor, and beauty. Beethoven added instruments and players, depth, complexity, and length to the symphonic structure. In most of our minds, Beethoven stands for symphony, lyrical, soaring, martial, passionate music, all exploding within the discipline of the movements. His monumental symphonies ushered us into the Romantic period, the 19th century, paving the way for Brahms, Tchaikovsky, Wagner, and Rachmaninoff. The 20th century challenged tradition with new forms and strange new sounds. Tone poems, folk songs, dissonance, expressionism, minimalism. Mahler, Copland, Shostakovich, Stravinsky. So, we need music. Hearing the work of the Master soothes and stretches our souls. Learning their stories stretches our minds. But for over 100 years, we have been able to record music and play it anytime we want. If we want classical music live, we can pay major orchestras to come and perform in Toledo. Why do we need to have our own orchestra? Because a Toledo orchestra belongs to us. It is ours, a source of pride for the home team, a wonderful surprise for the visitor, like the zoo, the universities, the museum, and the parks. The symphony is woven into the fabric, the infrastructure of Toledo, our city. It is part of us, part of our cultural DNA. And because when we have our own orchestra, we have musicians who live and work among us. A resident symphony orchestra is like a mountain spring. Each individual musician brings skill and discipline and knowledge, an abundant source of life and energy that flows out to nourish each corner of our community with the sustaining gift of music.
Forte section. This is great. Piano section.
Artists have only a few basic tools. Paint, chisels, words, notes are all they have to tell their story, make their statement, describe a place or a moment, share their joy or sorrow. As artists work, as they struggle to express their unique vision in images and sound, they must make constant, subtle, crucial decisions: color, texture, harmony, dissonance, plot, movement, rhythm, length, voice, darkness, shadows, light. The vision is a gift. The choices are driven by a fierce creative energy. The success of execution is the result of skill and discipline and years of practice. We see, read, or hear many excellent, accomplished works of art in our lifetime. We enjoy them all. There are a few, however, that stun us with their remarkable, singular vision, with the bold confidence of their technique, and by their power to engage our most profound emotions. When we encounter such art, we are changed. It is hard to describe what has happened to us because it is beyond our normal level of experience. In those encounters, we are connected to greatness. An art museum's mission is to hold and protect and display and interpret the greatest achievements in visual art. In the same way, an orchestra's mission is to hold and present and interpret the greatest achievements in musical art. It holds the whole repertory of classical music in trust. But music can't be framed and hung on the wall. It does not live unless it is played. The greatest symphony doesn't even exist without players and instruments and a conductor working together. Without them, even the most passionate piece of music is only notes on paper. A symphony orchestra was first heard in Toledo in 1897, over 100 years ago. In 1943, our present Toledo Symphony Orchestra was launched by a band of enlightened, stubborn community leaders, men and women who understood what a resident orchestra could mean for their city. 65 years later, we see our own Toledo Symphony Orchestra strong and sure at last. If we look back, we are astonished at the audacity of the early board members and conductors and players who had both the lofty vision and the dogged persistence to bring us to this day. We thank them. We thank each superbly skilled, energetic, good-spirited musician. 501 performances in 365 days. We look at the stage. We see the players, the instruments, winds and brass, strings and timpani and percussion. The conductor, who understands and respects the meaning of each written note and the range and skill of each musician and instrument, who hears what the composer wanted us to hear, and brings all these elements together into the miraculous sound that we call music. We honor them, leaders, mentors, teachers, messengers of beauty, who live and work among us, weaving music into our lives and hearts.
The Toledo Symphony Music Among Us is made possible in part by a grant from the Ohio Arts Council, a state agency that supports public programs in the arts.